Hey, everybody. Welcome to Nursing Uncharted. My name is Maggie Reichard, and I am the host of this podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about travel nursing, and specifically travel ICU nursing. And our guest today is Boyce McClellan. Boyce has been a critical care nurse for 6.5 years, with experience in just about every adult ICU setting. After spending 5 years as a staff nurse, he transitioned to travel nursing right before the pandemic shut down the country. Boyce has spent the last year working primarily in and around COVID, like many of us. In addition to nursing, Boyce is a 22-year veteran of the U.S. Navy and a father to an 18-year-old daughter. On his days off, Boyce is either mountain biking or seeking calm waters under his paddleboard. Boyce, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is awesome. I'm so glad you could be on with us. So tell me a little bit about your nursing background, how it started, how you started nursing, because I know you've done so many things with your career already.
Yeah. So I graduated from nursing school in 2014. I was a December grad, and I showed up to JMU with 2 years of school done already. I'd been in the Navy for a while, and I initially went into art school at JMU. I was going to be a graphic designer, and I pretty much did the entire program. I was getting done with it, and I was like, man, I cannot do this. I just did not have the confidence in myself to go out there and do it, and I saw that a lot of my compatriots were hustling or having to hustle a lot. And I kind of looked around, took a step back and looked around. And, I like to joke that I needed to find a real job, which I know all my graphic design people are going to hate on me for saying that.
It's a lot of contract work, right?
It is. And it's always rolling around in your head.
Yeah.
And working with clients, much like working with patients, is one of the most frustrating part of your job, and I didn't like that. So I kind of took a step back and I looked around, and somebody said, "Oh, you should be a nurse." And I was like, "Ugh, nursing? What is that?"
Right.
And they were like, "Well, you work 3 days a week and you get to wear pajamas to work." And I was like, "Sign me up."
Doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah. So, I just kind of, like all my major decisions in life, I made it on a whim. I somehow got through the prereqs. I got into nursing school at JMU, and then a friend of mine who was actually at law school decided he wanted to quit law school. Him and I had been in the Navy together, and he moved to Harrisonburg to go to JMU, and we ended up going through nursing school together.
Cool.
And yeah, it was fun. He drugged me kicking and screaming through nursing school. He ended up being our valedictorian for our class.
No kidding.
Whereas I was probably second to last, if not last. But I made it through, and it's really funny because my first job, I think we were a week from graduating. And I kind of looked around the class and I was like, "Hey, when are you guys going to start applying for jobs?" And everybody was like, "Dude, we already have jobs."
Oh my God.
And I was like, "Oh yeah, totally.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah. So I took 2 days from class. I skipped 2 days from class. I lined up interviews all the way down I-64 from Harrisonburg back. I went down one day doing interviews, and then I did interviews on the way back the next day. And I was a December grad, so all the HRs were like, "Well, go on break, go do your Christmas, New Year stuff. We'll call you after the break." And I was like, "Dude, I need a job now." And luckily, the University of Virginia Health System, the unit that I had interviewed at, offered me a job right then. And awesome. I was like, "Hey, first one offered me a job. Let's lock it down." It was one of the luckiest moves that I've ever made, because honestly, whoever had offered me a job first, I probably would have taken it. And luckily I ended up there.
Yeah. Everybody says it's hard to get a job as a new grad. I mean, because even though there's such a there's such a need for nurses, at least when, 7 years ago. I mean, I felt like everybody was really stressed about going to, everybody really wanted to go to like trauma ones or teaching hospitals, and like there's not as much of a need, I guess, in those places. But it's amazing how like you really stress for a job and then you become a traveler and it's like jobs are just handed to you left and right. And you're like, oh, I actually hold the cards here now.
Yeah. That's been a big eye opener. That's been really kind of great.
Yes. I think that it's kind of nice. I mean, if you ever like think about traveling, it's a good thing to like, if you want to get into a hospital like permanently, you can start out there as a traveler and like see if you like it. And then, it's just an easy way in,
Yeah. You're taking a unit for a test drive.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, that's really cool. Yeah, I know that that's a great place to work.
Yeah. So I went through a couple of units there, and then I'd been in the surgical trauma unit for a while, and I loved that job a lot. And an opportunity was presented to me to go do leadership at a little community hospital. And, I think because I'd been in the Navy where every 3 years you're always being moved around, that's kind of the way my life has kind of been molded. So I'd been in that unit that I did really enjoy working in, but I thought that like this was the next step for me. And I went and did leadership. It was a unit coordinator role. I think the HR person explained it to me that it was like an assistant manager of an ICU, but it wasn't technically called that. I think there's spots for 4 of those people on that unit. And it was a little community hospital with a general ICU. And that was probably the most challenging role I've ever had in nursing.
Yeah, what does that entail? Like that type of leadership position?
So I worked as charge. I worked 3 shifts as charge per week. And then in addition to that, then there was, all the assistant manager type stuff that you had to do that we shared amongst all the unit coordinators that were there. There was 2 there at the time.
Okay.
Or 3 when I first started, and then 1 moved on. So it was a lot of, writing schedules, audits, inner worker challenges. So you went into that job
as a charge?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's tough.
Yeah, it proved to be extremely difficult, and I'd always kind of said that I wanted to get into leadership in nursing because I had this background in the Navy. I've been managing and leading people throughout my naval career since it was like 21 or so. So I thought that had always come very easy.
Yeah.
And so I thought that I had a knack for it, and I was ready to give it a shot in the nursing world.
Yeah.
Little did I know.
It seems like, it's 2 jobs. You already said you work 12 hours as a charge. Oh, and then you have to do all of this. That's 2 jobs. It's 2 full-time jobs.
And, this was one of these places our staffing was continually low.
Yeah.
I was the IV team in the hospital. I was the MRT team, for medical responses. I was the code team, and you could hand that off to other people, or some people would volunteer to go if they had a low patient load. And you were also taking patients probably 75% of the time. So it was pretty demanding, and I kind of a month into it figured that out, but I stuck it out, and I kept, I was very hopeful working there, and the people that work there, many of them are still there now. It was a great team. It's very hard to step into that role, and I underestimated just how hard it was. So I didn't have a lot of fans there.
I mean, when you're stressed out and have 3 jobs in one position, you generally don't get a lot of fans.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of, you're just stressed all the time. Like
Yes.
your workload is.
Absolutely. It was, I remember I went to my PCP because I was sleeping 3 hours during the day in between shifts. I'd come home, go right to bed at 8.
Yeah.
And I'd be up by noon, unable to go back to sleep. And I was a night shifter for years, and my bedroom is very sacred. It's pitch black. I call it the cave. It's quiet. There's white noise. It's cool. I do all the things, and I was sleeping 3 hours at a time.
Yeah.
And I went to my PCP, and I was like, I need Ambien right now, and she was like, whoa, let's try some other things.
Yeah. Right.
So I did that for a long time. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you start traveling after? Is that the job that
I was
started?
I was sitting at that job, and I was 14 months and 1 week and 6 days into it. And
no, who's counting?
Nah. And I realized that nothing had changed, and there was always change that was about to happen, or we were going to see if something was going to happen. And it was frustrating because I cared as much about the people that worked, the nurses that were working there, as I did the patients.
We will be right back to this episode. We just want to take a brief moment to shout out the company that makes this show possible, American Mobile. If you're a nurse interested in traveling, visit AmericanMobile.com to explore the amazing benefits that American Mobile has to offer. Featuring short and long-term contract opportunities at leading facilities across the country with higher earning potential, W-2 employee status, and a flexible schedule, American Mobile is your advocate for career success. Visit AmericanMobile.com to begin your travel nursing adventure today. And now, back to the show. Tell me what it was like to start your first travel nursing career at the beginning of COVID, because being a traveler has its own challenges, let alone to being thrown into the middle of a pandemic.
So it was interesting. I ended up signing a contract to work in Alexandria, right outside of DC. At the last minute, they canceled their orientation and told us we were all just going to do it online.
Yeah.
Which was fine because I'd taken that first contract that was a little close to home in case I needed to, bail.
Yeah.
Bail out, right?
Absolutely.
And so, we did our orientation online, and then they said, come on up next week. And they had, days lined up for us, and, that's where they get you, you're going to talk to the manager and do all your scheduling and stuff like that. They kind of give you that first couple weeks that they've got laid out for you, and then you go from there. Mm-hmm. And I got there, I think, the last week of May. That was my first days on the floor. I was supposed to be working in a CV, a cardiac/neuro ICU. Mm-hmm. And as I was walking into the ICU, they were turning their tele unit into a pop-up ICU, essentially.
Yeah, that was right in the thick of it.
Yeah. They had it was, I was in the Navy, and I worked with a bunch of people that do a lot of high adrenaline stuff. And I always enjoyed that. So being in high acuity ICUs was right exactly where I needed to be in nursing.
Yeah.
So walking into that ICU, I was ready to go, man. I was just ready to jump right in. I knew I had 100% confidence in the PPE that we had. I don't know why.
Awesome.
That's kind of, I don't think a lot of people share that opinion on it, but I was just ready to go. I knew N95s worked well, and we had all kinds of stuff, and I immediately realized, well, we ran out.
We we had them, and then we didn't.
And then we didn't. But yeah, it was intimidating, because that time period, nobody knew what was going on. I hadn't lined up housing really yet. I ended up crashing with a friend, and I took a pair of scrubs with me so I could change in the parking lot. I was taking a hand sanitizer bath.
Yeah.
In the parking lot, and then I would get to my friend's house and go straight into the shower and scrub off. There was just so much unknown back then.
I know. We had our own system. I was in Florida during quarantine, and like I had my, like you wouldn't touch anything until you put all of your scrubs. But we weren't given. I mean, we weren't given scrubs. Like you just wore the ones you had, and then you went home in those scrubs. And there was I remember when we didn't have N95s either, and they were saying as long as you're wearing a surgical mask and the patient's wearing a surgical mask, it's fine. I was like, cool. And then I'm gonna go just nuts. But yeah, I remember having my own routine, needing to do all these things when you got home. Because did you ever wash your fruit and wash your groceries and stuff?
Didn't you wash your fruit before COVID?
I mean, I'm talking about I wiped down cereal boxes and freeze dried stuff, and
I wasn't that hardcore with it, but I think I read early on that they had found that COVID sitting on a flat surface in a dry area wasn't. You couldn't just wipe something and lick your finger and catch COVID.
Yeah.
Or somebody said that somewhere, or maybe I thought they did.
There's so much information out there, this could potentially help, or it was just changing so much. So I was so overloaded with information all the time.
Yeah. Man, I was thinking about that. I was listening to your first episode on the way here, and I was listening to, it just took me back, thinking about, how much was going on, how much information was being processed, and how fast things were changing, and how, I remember sitting in rounds with the attendings and just them not knowing what to do and being completely open for suggestions.
Yeah. That's terrifying.
And you just kind of worked as hard as you could, and you did the best that you could. And, you I'd never worked in a medical ICU other than that general ICU. So, ARDS was kind of something that I'd dabbled with a little bit in my patient population, but it was a steep learning curve that
now
went through but
talk about ARDS all day.
Right. But where your trajectory was headed for this learning curve was unknown. It was this learning curve that disappeared into the clouds, and you didn't know where you were going.
Yeah. Yeah. It was new information all the time.
No.
When we learned that COVID patients were improving on their bellies, I was like, this is just wild. And I've seen it night and day. I mean, a patient will be on 15 liters huffing and puffing in the chair, you get them back to bed on their belly, and then they can go down to 4 liters. They're 100%. I'm like, how did this happen?
Yeah. That time period was there's so much you want to talk about it, but that was the first time in the ICU that I really felt supported by the entire organization.
Yeah.
Because we had extra staff that was helping us out. I mean, I had 4 patients. We were doing team nursing, so I had 4 patients at a time. I had, a tele nurse or an ED nurse helping me.
Yeah.
We had turn teams that would come around and supine and prone patients. People were buying us lunch and delivering lunch to the hospitals. I think one day the Alexandria Fire Department came out to the hospital and had signs, and they were just there at shift change and just cheering everybody on.
That's awesome. That's actually, when I figured out I wanted to transition over to the ICU during COVID when I was cross training as a acute care nurse, and I was like, oh, this is actually so much cooler to me. Love my acute care, but at the same time, I just was really excited to really think critically on one or two people and be able to focus on their medical condition, and as opposed to getting wrapped up in like the psychosocial or the discharge plan and admitting people and, trying to patients like priorities are different than mine. And, it seems all of that seems more in line in the ICU, like priorities are in line, and, things are more everybody's more on the same page. I think there's a lot better communication because you have one or two people that you have to focus on. So.
Yeah. I'm an acuity junkie. I love it. And I've more than once said, hey, COVID was an ICU nurse's dream job because number one, they were sick patients and you got to use all of your skills, you know, and it wasn't just one or two, it was all of them.
Yeah. You constantly think, you have to think about every aspect of, they're very, you get to use all of your brain.
Yeah. And then, the cynical part of me was like, high acuity patients using all your skills. Their families are at home. You're not having to navigate that relationship.
Yeah.
And your patients are, and this is the cynical side of me, is like your patients are intubated and they're not,
well, that's what I'm talking about. In med surg, it's sometimes people do get in the way of their own health and their own care, and family also does the same thing. In acute care, I saw both. Sometimes family members are so hard to deal with, and they're harder to deal with than the patients. But then at other times you see that the patients their care isn't as good because their advocate isn't there. It was a give and take. In acute care, I feel like in the ICU, everything is, you're watching them constantly all the time. You have a million people involved in their care, less gets missed, I feel like. But in the acute care setting, I was I like this, but I also I don't know, in certain circumstances it was nice to have family back.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, you've worked in, how many ICU settings have you worked in?
So I've always been an ICU nurse. I started off in a neuro ICU. And then I went to that surgical trauma burn unit. And then I went to a general ICU, and those were my staff jobs. My first contract as a traveler was it was a COVID ICU. And then from there, what did I do? I ended up taking a contract in my parents', or in my hometown. I say it's my parents' town, I don't claim it, but it's the town where I grew up. In East Texas, and it was a really interesting unit. It was a universal care COVID unit, so you had floor patients all the way up to ICU patients in the same unit. And the ICU nurses that were contracted there, we had our ICU patients that we took care of, and we didn't have to go take care of the other ones. That's where they put us. But you were working with hand in hand with floor nurses. You'd go pull them to help you, or you'd go help them do something. And then I went to another COVID unit in Dallas. And we ended up, this was another one of those where the curve kind of flat bottomed out, and we ended up closing that unit.
Nice.
And then we opened a surgical trauma ICU. That hospital opened a surgical, and I was like, hey, don't cancel my contract. Just move me right over there. That's my bread and butter,
Yeah.
So I ended up working there for a while. And then I took a couple months off to go work for the Navy. And then not doing medical stuff. I helped plan the President Biden's inauguration.
Oh, cool.
So we went from planning a whole bunch of events to just a couple, but I don't do medical stuff in the Navy, so it's always a nice break from nursing.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So from there, I came to Austin. A friend of mine that I'd worked as a travel nurse in Dallas had taken a contract in Austin, and he's a real cool guy, real laid back gentleman that's from California. He'll tell you, he's like, oh, I'm from the coast, not from, inland. But
they have to make that like differentiation in California.
But he's an older guy, and we just hit it off in Dallas, and we had a great time working together. And we went for contract. He was already working a contract in Austin. He was actually outside of Austin, and my intention was to work that same contract and work with him again and hang out. And I ended up, the system where we got our contracts through put me at a different spot. So I just finished 16 weeks there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be off for a while?
Oh my gosh. That feeling, that feeling when you finish your last day, your last shift, you clock out and you feel that weight just lift from your shoulders.
Yeah.
It's just a great, great feeling.
Yeah. That was a great thing about traveling, is that even if it's a job that you wouldn't have, wanted to stay in, like, that it's a finite, assignment. It's an assignment. And so like, I felt like I could do whatever as long, for 3 months, I could do it, whatever.
Absolutely. There's a light at the end of the tunnel and you can see it from day one.
Yeah. And I know, so I want to talk about Austin too. Austin is kind of a trending city right now. What are some important things to think about when you're doing, a 13, 16 week contract in a bigger city or a trending city like Austin?
I think, I kind of touched on this the other day when I was talking to you. I kind of give Austin mixed reviews.
Yeah.
I'm from East Texas, so I have a love-hate relationship with Texas and the people there. But Austin is still a cool city. It's gone through a lot of changes since I was living in Texas 20 years ago. It's still changing today. I think anytime you're going to end up taking a contract in a hip, trendy transplant city that is like Austin or Denver or even Charlotte or Nashville, these like cities that people have just been flocking to for the last 10 years. You just, a friend of mine actually is a travel nurse, told me, he goes, you can do contracts in these towns, but just go ahead and get in your mind that you're not really going to make a lot of money. You're going to have a good time. And that's that's why you're there.
It's the experience. Yeah, absolutely.
So, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, it's the ability to kind of live like a local for an extended amount of time, instead of just going there for like a weekend or a week.
Yeah. When I was in art school, I had a professor that once said, you'll never truly appreciate being in a place until you've been bored there.
That's, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. It's because it's only when you're bored that you notice those little nuances that makes that place that place.
Yeah.
And
then you're ready on to the next.
Yeah. So,
were there any favorite spots or things to do in Austin? Somebody that might be interested in doing an assignment there?
Yeah. I mean, Austin it's a big foodie town. All right. If you like to eat, Austin's a place to go. If you like to drink, Austin's a place to go. you can be working with 10 people and ask them where they get the best pizza and you'll get 10 answers. Ask them where they get the best tacos and they'll give you 20 answers.
Yeah.
So you can throw a dart at a map and find a food truck in Austin.
Yeah.
So I know I definitely got a little fluffier while I was there, just because there's so much good food, and there's just so much to explore in a culinary way.
Yeah.
If you
absolutely.
enjoy outdoor stuff, Austin's a great town for it. Town Lake's right there. There's paddleboarding.
Mm-hmm.
There's, bike clubs. I love to mountain bike. So when the weather was nice, which was a big if this year, I was out on the trails riding as much as I could, and there was a pretty good community there of people doing that. I mean, if you have a habit or a hobby, I guarantee there's somebody in Austin that does it.
Well, I want to get into this lightning round. Boyce and I had an idea to do a lightning round of questions, a series of questions Boyce was going to ask me. You ready to do this?
All right. So these are fun. And this is just answer as fast as you can, whatever pops in your head. Okay. All right. So here we go. Question number 1. What is your least favorite bodily fluid?
Oh, blood.
Blood.
It's got to be blood.
All right.
Yeah.
What's your favorite medical term?
What is the longest word? Esophagogastroduodenoscopy.
Dang.
Yeah,
that's good.
longest word in the world.
You've clearly never been to Germany. Next up.
Probably haven't.
What's your favorite role during a code?
I just started doing codes, and I've really just been doing chest compressions. So I've been getting a lot of experience with that. But right now chest compressions probably, and also the scribe. I think that.
Okay.
I mean it. Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite go-to phrase for annoying patients or patient family members?
Oh, that's a good one. Oh, go-to phrase. Oh, I got to think of a situation. Oh, I'm blanking because I want it to be a lightning round.
Oh, that's okay.
Let's
All
go
right,
back
we'll
to
circle
it.
back.
Let's go back.
We'll circle back. All right. What's your favorite holiday to work?
Black Friday.
Oh, okay.
It's considered a holiday.
It's ridiculous.
I used to use that. Mm-hmm.
So, what's the dumbest request that you've ever received from a provider? Or most annoying?
I remember there was a person who had calciphylaxis and their calcium level was 10, and this intern ordered IV calcium. And I called him and I was like, you didn't really mean to do that, right? That's... And he was like, oh my God, no, I did not mean to do that. I'm like, yeah, I know.
That's like the Scrubs moment. You sure you want me to give 1,000 milligrams of morphine? Thought I'd ask before I killed somebody.
Right. What's the goal here? What's the plan here?
All right. Okay, the phone just rang. How do you answer the work phone?
Mickey, this is Maggie.
Okay. All right. That's a funny. I mean, the only reason I ask that is because they don't teach that in school, and you see people kind of flounder with it, and everybody has a different way of doing it.
Oh, yeah. Actually, and I forget. Well, we don't have phones now, which I freaking love so much that I don't have a freaking work phone. Oh my God. That people will just find me where I am. I'm old school in that way, but I mean, it just drives me nuts. But sometimes I would come home and I would answer my phone, my personal phone, 6 West is Maggie.
All right. What's your favorite medical TV show?
Oh, it used to be Grey's Anatomy. There was such a funny show. This woman, she was on Mad TV. She was Miss Swan from Mad TV. Do you remember that show?
Vaguely.
But it was a show about, I think it was a nursing home or assisted living, but they got it spot on. It was such a dry comedy, and they only went 1 or 2 seasons, but I laughed so hard. I wish I could remember the name of that show, But I was so upset because it's obviously like not enough medical professionals were watching the show, and so it was just other people and they didn't get it. But like to me, it was such a perfect show. I think it was on HBO. I gotta find. I'll send you what it is.
All right. And then here's a slow ball. Oh yeah, actually, sorry. What podcast are you listening to right now?
I was listening to a podcast on podcasts. It was called Make Noise.
There you go.
Yes.
All right. And what's the best university in Virginia?
Best university in Virginia? I mean, JMU.
Obviously.
Obviously. It has to be.
All right.
Go Dukes.
Well, since we skipped this one, I'll give you mine. My favorite go-to phrase for annoying patients. Anytime somebody starts talking about stuff, I like to say, well, sir or ma'am, I can't speak to that. But this is what we're going to do now.
Oh, that's I think I put up with too much. I definitely put up with too much. And I definitely like people, I'm like being in acute care neuro, like you talk to a lot of confused, delirious people during the day. And I'll just like have, like nonchalant, ridiculous conversations with confused patients, just, and I just go too long with it. Like, because I'm afraid that if I tell them like, sir, you're confused or trying to like, then it's going to escalate something else. And it's like, let's just like keep this.
Let's just run with it.
Yeah, let's just run with it. Conversational. What do you think are some of the most important things to ask for in a contract?
I think really it's the recruiters that make or break it,
Yeah.
You can have a really great recruiter and, my first recruiter has since moved on from being a travel nurse recruiter. And she was amazing, especially for a new traveler, and to go from her to my next recruiter who she was all right. I mean, she was good, but she just, she wasn't going to talk to me for an hour about her week or my week. But, she was able to, do the things I needed for her, and really, if you're a very self-sufficient person, you can, you don't really need that much involvement from your recruiter. But when you do need them, you need them. But something that I started doing that I've never heard any other traveler talk about this is I kind of hold like an impromptu interview with my recruiters when I first meet them. And I try to let them schedule it too, because nobody wants to get on the phone and have like somebody bombarding them with questions that are like, how do you deal with hard people to work with? Like these typical interview questions. And therein, it's just like any other interview because, recruiters, depending on who you are, you work for the recruiter works for you. Really, you're working together, and
it's a great idea.
I asked one recruiter, I was like, hey, I'd like to hold just like a little informal interview with you, just kind of learn what you're all about. And he was like, I'm not doing that. Right. I'm not coming to work for you. And I was like, all right, cool. Well, have a nice day.
Right. Yeah. Like,
no problem.
Thank you for saving me some time. Yeah. I appreciate that.
So, and like, if you're going to be working in this environment, I think, it behooves you to kind of really get to know who you're going to be working with,
Yeah.
So that's something that I've started doing probably in the last two contracts. I've kind of sat down with my recruiter before we really started talking about contracts and stuff and gotten to know each other,
That's awesome. I am kind of the same way. I don't use I didn't used to use my recruiters, for anything else really than just, some people really foster like friendships with their recruiters, and I was never really that way. It was kind of like, I feel like you have to be comfortable with them. You have to be comfortable like vouching for yourself in contracts and, asking for additional things that you need or, because like they're trying to make money too. Like, it's a balance. You like, one of my favorite recruiters actually he was brand new, I think, or he had only been working for like 3 months. And I think it was one of the best recruiter relationships I had because he also felt like he had something to prove and he was learning, just the same time I was learning. And I felt like he was really like, fighting for me for contracts as opposed to maybe another recruiter that was kind of like had so many to juggle, I mean, he was still trying to like get his, base of nurses. So that's interesting that you kind of had the same experience with that nurse. I mean, the recruiter.
Yeah. And, I always tell people, ask for the moon and see what they'll give you,
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. The worst thing they're going to do is say no.
Right. I believe that too. You always have to just, all you can do is ask, especially in those places where you really, cost of living is high, and expenses. I did 2 assignments in New York City and I just, accepted the fact that I was going to be poor for, like 3 months and then another 4.5 months. But I mean, yeah, so the more you can ask for, the more you have, the better. So,
yeah.
What's been your strategy for finding housing since you've been traveling?
So my first contract, COVID kicked off. I crashed with a friend for a couple weeks, and then Hilton ended up giving nurses and first responders hotel rooms for like 2 or 3 months. And actually, I think a lot of hotel organizations were doing that, and so
nobody else was using them.
Yeah, they were empty, and so I rode that wave for a little bit, and then right at the end of that, I had a friend that literally lived across the street from the hotel I was staying in Alexandria.
Oh,
and,
cool.
A friend of mine from the Navy, and she had an empty room, and so I just threw an air mattress in it and crashed for like the last 2 weeks I was there, and that was that.
Nice.
And then I told you I did this contract at my parents' hometown.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first time I'd lived with my parents in 21 years, I think.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Gives me anxiety just thinking about it. Sorry, Mom and Dad.
I mean, they loved it. They loved it.
Oh, of course. Of course.
Yeah. I loved it too, Mom. But it was... I just treated them like roommates, and I don't think they really were ready for that. They were just kind of like, why are you taking out the trash? And I was like, because it needs to be done, and they're like, why are you emptying the dishwasher? I'm like,
I have my own house now. This is just common things for me to complete.
So, but that was the first contract that I started working 48s. And then, so I wasn't around the house too much, and then, because they're older and Texas, nobody cares about COVID in Texas or East Texas. And I played a good bit of golf just to get out of the house, and I'm not really a big golfer. But then I used Furnish Finder to go to Dallas, and I lucked out. If anybody out there wants a good spot, let me know. Because I ended up in this massive house on a lake. It was 20 minutes from work, and the host just let travelers of various industries. So there was a travel IT person there. There was a travel lawyer there. Apparently traveling is not just for nursing.
It's not.
So, so like I got to meet a lot of cool people.
Hostel.
Yeah, it was a little traveler hostel. Got to meet some really cool people.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was really funny because when I went up there to look at when I was getting ready to move up there, my parents were like, "So is your hotel gonna have a kitchen?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not staying in a hotel." And they're like, "Where are you staying?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm renting a room from this woman." And they're like, "You mean with a stranger?" And I was like, "Yes, Mom. It's gonna be fine. She's a stranger." But
it's a different world.
Yeah, Airbnb. And the host was amazing. She spent her days making TikToks and talking, doing readings, like tarot readings and stuff like that. And she was just the most warm-hearted person that I've met. And so, and then when I came to Austin, I had a friend that we reconnected after 20 years of, we'd been in the Navy together 20 years ago as little 18-year-old kids. And I met him, we reconnected on Facebook, and I was like, hey man, you got any friends that need a roommate? And like within 5 minutes, he had me a spot to live. So
that's awesome.
I just kind of lucked out.
It's good to have, I mean, you network so much as a traveler. You meet so many people and,
Yeah. So I think, my next contracts, I'm looking at places where I don't know anybody, so it's going to be interesting. But I would just say, you got to check all your bases: Facebook, Furnish Finder, Craigslist if you're really brave.
There's a bunch.
See what pops up.
Pad Mapper is another one. Hot Pads, I think those are, maybe there's city specific, but I've looked on those before. There's so many. I mean, Furnish Finder is one of the biggest ones. I feel like I've used Furnish Finder. I've looked out on that. I think I did Facebook Marketplace too. Found rooms there.
Yeah, I've talked to a bunch of people that, when they stayed in hotels and long stays and Airbnbs, and my father's frugalness is running strong in me, so I try not to do those. Those aren't usually my first option.
Yeah. How much do you bring with you in every contract? Like, do you just have like a car full of stuff, or?
Yeah. I am the guy with too many hobbies. And Austin.
You got your bike. You got your.
I've got my bike. I've got a paddle board that I got in Austin. I've got a whole box of books that I'm just kind of chipping away at ever so slowly. One chapter a week.
Yeah.
What else? I brought some paints to paint some
cool.
stuff. Haven't touched them. Haven't even. They went under the bed in my last contract, and I pulled them out when I went to leave.
Yeah.
But let's see. And then I think when I go home, I'm gonna be bringing out rock climbing gear and camping gear for my next contract, which I plan on doing in the mountains somewhere.
Nice. So that's what's next. So you're not. I was going to ask you what's next. So like somewhere Colorado or
this morning I sent my favorite recruiter my wish list, right? And I was like, day shift, ICUs, mountains, X pay,
Yeah.
X or greater than pay, mountains. And she was like, okay. And I was like, and I don't, Denver's great, but I'm ready. I want to be like in the mountains.
Yeah.
Right. So, somewhere I'm not married to any place, but I need some real elevation in my life.
Yeah. Do you ski or snowboard?
Yeah, both. I've gotten into, I am bound and determined to become better at snowboarding. I've actually had both of my shoulders scoped thanks to snowboarding accidents.
Oh no.
But it's I love it. So I love doing both. I love the snow.
Yeah.
Every time spring break season hits and everybody's going to the beach, I'm going someplace cold.
Going to the mountains. Well, that's really cool. Well, Boyce, I think that is the end of our episode. Thank you so much for coming in here and doing this with me. This was awesome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this whole project of yours.
That brings us to the end of the show. Thanks for tuning in to Nursing Uncharted. To learn more about today's episode, make sure to explore the show notes at americanmobile.com/nursinguncharted. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a guest. If you're a nurse interested in traveling, visit americanmobile.com to explore the largest database of travel nursing jobs in the industry and the amazing benefits that American Mobile has to offer. Also, a special thanks to producer Jonathan Carey, assistant producers Katie Schraubin and Sam McKay, and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. Until next time, take care of yourself.